mink in the 40s were worth big money, and I made sure that trap was set right. I get it there and spend a lot of time, make sure the leaves and little grass and everything was camouflaged. And then I realized when I got a little older, I was wasting a lot of time. All you have to do, with your glove on, dig a little pocket, back and forth and seat the trap, reach down, get a little bit of liquid mud, camouflage. And if you're really going to run a long trap line, you've got to learn to do that. The more that you fool around, the less you're going to catch. My theory is percentages. You set so many traps, you get so much fur. And I'm not saying you should just throw them in, but the more you trap, the better you get, like anything. Practice. But it's the same in business or in our personal lives. You have to be organized. And we see it all the time. You be around some of your friends and you'll see them doing something and you see a better way to do it. That's trying to improve your methods, be organized. Successful people have a plan. A plan isn't any good unless you follow it. Make your plan. Sometimes you have to adjust it back and forth until you get a smooth working plan. In 1947, a group of trappers met in Monticello. Some were well known. Walter Arnold, my friend, the old legendary mountain man, he was well known. And there was O.L. Butcher from New York. He came in too. And I see the point. They wanted to make sure other states were organized too. And the more a group is organized across the country, the more successful you're going to be. And E.J. Daly, Gene Hill, he was a well-known Pennsylvania trapper. And they had a very sizable group of men. They understood, that they need to be organized and have a trappers association. They knew it was only a matter of time before the anti-trap organization would submit a bill, and they're still trying to do it. And, I'm surprised that the main trappers, there's a lot of you people belong to the association you have. Some of you are like members. But there's a good many of them don't belong. They don't belong to the association. And I tell you a little story. This is a true story. I was talking to this guy and trying to get him to join, and he said, no. He said, I don't believe in joining organizations. He said, I'll trap until they take it away from me. And then I'll set my rocking chair and rock. Well, I think a lot of our friends are in that position. They're just sitting there rocking. Let us do the work. And that's not fair. It's not fair at all. When I was president of the MTA from 1964 to 1978, I can remember almost losing our number 14 on Ida Jump. I was very good friends with the department at the time. Maynard Marsh was a commissioner. And I knew them all, biologist John Hunt. And of course they would talk about traps with teeth. They took the bear trap, which I didn't feel was any reason for it. Bear trap has to be in a cubby, has to be 2 strands of wire, it has to be posted bear trap in French and English at the time. So it was just something to appease the antis, And finally, the Animal Trap Company in Pennsylvania, they caved into that, and so they took the teeth off the traps, which I didn't think was. But the number 14, if you ever trap beaver, it's a wonderful trap, one of the best. I've caught beaver with a hind foot on a slant pole. They go by and hit it. I actually caught one with a tail, got him good, hung right onto him. So I said to Maynard, I said, no. I said, they'd already taken it off land, which I could understand that. I had hound dogs, and I wouldn't want one of my dogs in a trap. I told them at the legislature quite a few times they had bills up. I said, in fact, as I was for removing the traps with teeth on land because of that, I said, I wouldn't want my dog in that trap. And one of the trappers, he was pretty ugly. He wanted the first traps there. But I think most of them realized, I had the best interest of all the trappers, not just for me or this gentleman. So anyway, I talked to them, and I said, well, Maynard said, well, Oscar, he said, you could take it and grind the teeth off. I said, Maynard, they're only on the ice. The most they're going to catch is a muskrat or an otter or a beaver. So I said, and finally he said to John, he said, delete it. So we hung on to the 14 for that reason. And I remember being in, when I was the president legislature, that they had a bill on land trapping like that, and I was there to oppose it. And very few trappers in the organization. But when the bill comes today, we want to support it. There's a reason. And I feel this is what I've always said. If it's not for the best interest of the trappers and the animals and the people, then don't use it. Remove it if it's that dangerous. I tell this to people, and believe me, I'm not an anti-trap. I'm a trapper, have been all my life. But if I was anti-trap, I could tell them something that they would probably like to hear. I said, most of the trappers, they're just average working people. And there's probably even less than a third of the trappers that belong to the association. I said, if you was to take your money and put the pressure on those trappers, you'd defeat them. Because they can't. They don't have that money to keep putting in it. And the rest of the trappers are going to sit back and let them do it. And I said, you'd lose your trapping. And you give that some thought. You would. Good thing I got notes, because if you didn't have notes, the first thing you do is start rambling from one subject to another and back onto the same subject. So I try to keep notes for that reason. And like I said just a few minutes ago, if you belong to the MTA, you'll want to. There's a few. In fact, I tried to get there's a lot of trappers that have a lifetime license in the inland fisheries and wildlife. So they do believe in it. But I feel, what reason would you not want to join the MTA? Pretty cheap insurance. And your president and your group of people are going to support any bill that's not for the best interest of the trappers. But in all fairness, a lot of people, they're not exposed to organizations like you people are, and they don't know. So it's up to us to remind them, the job ahead. And I feel, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes, the NRA, there's 100 million gun owners, and there's about 5 million that belong to the NRA. Now, do you think that's fair that we should, and there's two very important, well, they're not important to me, but they're there to oppose us. Mike Bloomberg, billionaire. George Soros, another one. And they're dumping millions in there because they want to take the guns away from us. They want to take the Second Amendment. That's what they want. They want the Second Amendment. And the only one stands in the way is the National Rifle Association. But they can't fight forever and ever. I get letters all the time, and I've made donations several a year. And I know some of you people belong to the NRA, and it's a great organization. I just told somebody this afternoon, I said, I couldn't go to Washington and oppose what they're doing. It cost me thousands of dollars. For just a few dollars, they'll do my work. And there's enough numbers right now, so they are a force. But they're trying to raise more money, these antis, so that they can defeat us. And the NRA is a little worried. I get the letters, we need more money, we need more members. So give it some thought. It's not fair just for a few gun owners. And I believe if you lose your rights of your Second Amendment, you lose your trapping. If they could overpower a giant organization like the National Rifle Association, Maine trappers, even the national trappers, small, they roll it over. Yeah. So that's you need to talk to your friends. I can't talk to everybody. Talk to as many people as I can, but you need to talk to them, tell them, how important it is. But I maintain this, try as you would with the people that have a trapping license. You'll find a percentage, no matter who it is or who talks to them, they won't join. They are what I call the rocking chair people. They'll sit there and rock until everything is gone. When it's all gone, they'll sit in their rocking chairs. And I feel this way that, if you have children, boys or girls, girls do just as much now in the outdoors as boys. You're not being fair to them. You got to hold it like they did for us until they get to an age they're big enough to support what we've done. And let's, like I said right here, if we lose our guns in hunting, and trapping would be the very early next thing to take. And if there isn't anything to hunt, especially if you don't have a gun, how are you going to hunt? The only thing I can see you could hunt with is a camera. It's interesting to take pictures of animals, yes. But you've lost the sport of hunting, the tradition that's always been made. And if I was studying the dictators like Adolf Hitler, Hitler said to the people, he said, very soft and very subtly, he said, you really don't need your guns. And in fact, the guns could be hurt you. Somebody might steal your gun, shoot one of your members' family or the whole family. He said, give us your guns and we'll protect the guns, keep them, and my men will take care of you. Well, you know the history. When he got the guns, he was a ruthless dictator. They did what he said, or they were shot. The older you get, like I said, I'm 88, I'm not concealing my age. But I was telling Jerry LeBeau, I was showing him, I said, I get up every morning and I exercise. I'm a country music fan. I got probably 1,000 of the old country records, 33s. So I put it on, and it's quite interesting. I've put thousands on that little record player. And it's getting old. And all of a sudden, I could hear a squeak. I said, I wonder what I should do. I said, WD-40. Had no idea it would take care of the problem. I looked at the little lever up like that, put it on, smooth. So every week, a week and a half, 2 weeks, I don't let it tell me that, I'll just pick it up and give it another couple of squirts. Keeps on working. Is freedom worth fighting for? I think it is. We got untold thousands of soldiers on foreign land laying in their graves because they believe in freedom. They're willing to fight for it. So with that in mind, I don't think there's any excuse for any of us not to fight for what we believe in the main trappers. Good laws, and I mean sometimes we need to oppose some of our fellow trappers. If the animals, I always felt when I was the president of the MTA, that if you looked after the animals, you looked after the trappers. You would have animals. And somebody questioned me on that. I said, yes. I said, maybe I am a little close, protecting animals. So I said, but if I'm right, we'll have animals. But if you're wrong, you're not going to have animals. Consider back, the mountain was protected for 50 years because they just didn't have any sense to, slow down. The fisher was protected for 19 years. And when they put that protection on the fisher, Walter Arnold told me, he said, they got so numerous, you couldn't keep out of your fox or your bobcat sets. And he said, when they cleaned the food out, then they moved from the north down to the south, down in our country now, right around here. So sometimes you can go too far the other way. It needs to be a balance. You gotta harvest. You have a group of animals that need to be taken care of. And I believe, because I'm a believer in God, and I believe that in the book of Genesis, he said, let's give man dominion over the animals. Give him dominion. And that means if we are sensible and protect the animals when they need protected, but harvest them when they need to be harvested, that's what he meant. You know, use some common sense. And like I said, the older you get, the more you realize how precious life is. You don't know. You start to think about, well, I had my physical about a month ago, and he said, I'm 88. He said, you may have another 8 or 10 years ahead of you. So if I got 8 or 10 more years ahead of me, I need to take care of my body. And the Bible tells me the body is the temple of God. So you're supposed to take care of it. And when I realized that, I don't drink any alcohol, no tobacco, no drugs or anything like that. And I believe that I've read some books on drugs. You know, the drug companies, they want to make money. And that's what the author said. It's all about money. They had one drug on the market, and they made $2.1 billion. But it killed 137 people. So they took it off. I mean, they couldn't justify it any longer. So that's what he says. It's all about money. They make billions and billions of dollars. Now, I'm not saying that drugs are not good. Sometimes drugs will save your life under some, but you get hooked on drugs. Hank Williams, the country singer, he died at 29, and he was really what you call an alcoholic. And he had a back problem, and the back problem, a lot of pain. And he told his band, he said, the doctor says you take one of these, you're going to feel good. Think what it does to you when you take 4. Okay? And that's what happened. He died. As near as I can tell, I've read everything I could on Hank Williams, and near as I can tell, he was in a hotel room. He was going to the next show on New Year's Day, and he hadn't had his supper. He had a young boy named, his last name was Carr, C-A-R-R, and he was a chauffeur. And they ordered two meal steak. Carr ate his, but Hank didn't. He was just kind of out. And so he called the doctor. The doctor gave a B12 shot. And people that studied the case, they say that they think he was dead. They carried him out to put him in the car, take him to the show. And they said when they carried him out, he made a kind of coughing noise. They said a dead person, when you move him like that, will emit some sound like that. But it was a sad thing, you know, man 29 years old, dead, you know. And it wasn't the drugs, it was prescription drugs. It was what he was on for the pain. But between that and alcohol, it just did it in. He was speaking about age. Walter Arnold, I was up to his camp. I spent a lot of time with Walter. And he told me one night he was having supper. He said, you know, Oscar, he said, he was in his 80s then, early 80s. He said, most of my friends are either dead or in nursing homes. And quite often that happens because they don't realize that body is the temple of God. You've got to take care of it. You know, you really have to give the proper food. And the book of Leviticus said, you drink water. Excuse me for a minute. It tells you the clean and the unclean foods. So anyway, he said that's what's happened. It's, they're either dead or in nursing homes. And do you ever go into a nursing home and watch people? They can hardly get their arms up. You know, I was telling Jerry, I said, you know, I exercise every day. I said, I wouldn't want to. I'd talk anyone out of a fight. But if I got into a fight to protect myself, I think I could. Because I did box as a young, not professional, but I know how to handle myself, you know how to get the guard up. Now I know how to throw a quick punch, you know, cover like that. I said, but after a couple of minutes, I'd probably in some trouble. You know, they push me too hard. And when you get 80, you don't want to be pushed that hard. But I'm planning on a bobcat hunt this winter. And I know I got to get out there and I got to exercise. I got to walk every day. Not just on the highway. That's pretty good exercise. But I need to get in the woods just like I'm on bobcat. I need to be stepping over trees, blowdowns, crawling over, falling over. And I've always said, you know, I've told my friend Herb Moss, he was a state trooper, and I've known him for years, I said, when I fall down and I can't get up, it's time for me to stop. And I've always managed to get a hold of a bush or a tree and get back up. It's like Archie Moore, the boxer. He was fighting Yvonne Durrell, tough Canadian fisherman. He was tough. In the first round, he won all over Archie. Archie was a champion, light heavyweight champion. And he knocked him down. And finally, Archie laying on the canvas looking up at the lights there, and he said, well, he got up, and he knocked him down the second time. He knocked him down the third time. If it had been a non-title fight, the fight went over, because that's the rules. So, this is what I was always impressed with. He said, he looked up and he says, this can't be old Archie laying here. I got to get up. So the willpower, no matter what you're doing, has a lot to do with it. Now, how bad do you want to do it? And I still trap. I don't trap on the professional basis like I did when I was younger, but I usually take 8-10 days and set a line of traps. The only thing I kind of scolded myself that I'm doing that I shouldn't at my age is you get on those brooks, you know, slippery rocks. You know what I'm talking about. If you're fishing, you get on a rock and you'll slip. And I did something I should have done last year. There was a large brook. It was almost be considered like a river. And there was so much water coming down through, they put 2 culverts so they would separate the water so it wouldn't be so much pressure on one culvert. And I walked across it, but like I do fishing, I always find a place I can lock one foot in. And I always make sure it is solid before I take the other step. I made it across it, but I should have had a pair of creepers on. This fall I will do that. But I expect to trap up in my 90s. I don't think, of course, anything could happen. I've been very fortunate up on the logging roads there for years, 30 years up there. 40 different times I've been totaled. The first time, and it's like the middleweight champion Rocky Graziano said, he wrote a book, he said, somebody up there likes me. Well, you just don't go through the many episodes I did, but somebody there's a power there beyond what we can recognize. But we were coming from the camp, which is 16 miles from Dacombe in Maine. And we, just checking my time. And we left the camp, and of course in the woods there, the wind, some snowing a little bit, just slightly, but the wind was pretty good. See the spruce trees were waving back and forth, but didn't give it any thought. So we get out to Dacombe, that's the border town, and it was starting to snow harder, and the wind. So we traveled through Dacombe into St. Camille, the next town. We got there, and then they got into the farmlands. If you've ever been up there, it's all farming country. Wide fields. Well, the whiteout we couldn't see, and it was coming, and what it was doing, it was taking the road. And so there was really not two-way traffic, but just one-way traffic. But we didn't know that. So my partner, Vince, said, I can't see. I said, I can't either. I can't see anything. Just about we did that, we hadn't traveled 20 feet, and boom! So we get out. Of course, mind you, we weren't thinking right. There could be other cars like us traveling. So we get out, and we found the bumpers were locked. So we got hold of them, jumped up, bumpers up and down, came loose. And then we opened the hood and see how much damage it did to the radiator. The brackets were loose, but it wasn't leaking. It was not leaking. It hit hard enough so the brackets came loose. So we could have traveled on, but we had to wait till the Canadian Mounties came, to investigate the accident. So while we were doing that, he was talking English and he was talking French. I met a hunter one time about my camp, and he spoke in French and I spoke in English. He spoke in French and I spoke back in English. Finally, we partied. So anyway, I said, well, while they're talking and with the police are coming, I looked at the truck to see how much damage it did to the truck, slamming my snowmobile, forward. So I was looking at it all over like that, and I said, well, I don't know, skis don't look like it's bent. And something told me, I had this feeling, turn around. I turned around, probably from here to that post there, this black sedan was coming out of that snow. I was 37 years old, pretty active. I turned around and I said, jump! And I hit the bank like that, and boom! Right where I was standing. 10 seconds. I should have been killed. No, why? Why would I look around just at the right time? It's amazing. And I had 2 or 3 more, but I'm not going to be bothered with all the accidents here. But I had 2 of them totally. One was glass in the windshield. I wasn't belted in, and I said I never would be belted in after that. I wasn't belted in, and because he hit, and the hood folded up like that, and just like a sword, came right through the windshield. Took the windshield right out. Right where I was sitting, came right in through. I was over on the passenger side, tight, threw me right over there. Boots, glasses, had a pair of glasses, never did find those. And the truck driver, I could see why he was going that speed. He came down off of Branch 17 couldn't see the lights until he went into the woods there. And then he was coming down that hill to make a run for the hill where I was just coming down. So he had a load on, he wanted to make it. But he was coming too fast. And I was just about like here to the post again, to the bridge. And it's something you can't say, well, now let's see, what will I do? Your mind works pretty quick. I knew the only thing to do was get across the bridge and get up on the bank. For me to try to back up at night with a truck coming that speed, he's blinking his lights, I'd 9 chances out of 10, I'd swung sideways like that, he'd taken me right in the middle. So anyway, when we come up it, he went up the hill, and finally he came back, and he was excited. I was sitting there, and the truck wrecked. And he said, you all right? You all right? Well, how do you know if you're all right when you've been hit like that? I said, well, I guess so. Well, he said, get out of that truck before it blows up. So he got me out on the bank, and I never forget it. The last name was Seal. And I'm standing there, kind of dazed in the middle of the road, and he walks around me twice. He was really nervous. The third time he stopped, he says, you're a lucky man to be alive. I said, I know that. And they told me that afterwards he was so shook up he couldn't drive the truck away. Somebody had to come and drive the truck. So it's, but there's another one, but I'm not going to bypass that, but it shows you how could you escape so many close calls. I believe in the camp, and up in that north country, snowstorms all the time. Sometimes it'll snow for 10, 15 minutes, it'll snow just as hard as you can hardly see, big flakes. They don't stop. Well, I came out of the camp. Well, what it is, the rule is, if you can't make customs by 2 o'clock, U.S. Customs, you can't go through. So you go back, if you're a trucker, you go back to Clayton Lake at the boarding house, and you put up for the night. And then the next morning, Monday morning, you go through to customs that opens at 5 o'clock. Well, the driver going out, he was loaded. And he did the right thing. He was on his side of the road, going on his side. 12 inches of snow, it was Monday, hadn't plowed over the weekend. So you can see the big tracks right through. And I got out there and I started down and I got to one I call the big curve. I started around the curve like that and I could see. It might have been a little farther, it might have been 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 4 or 5 posts. I could see this red truck coming at me. Had made a decision. I just snapped her in full-wheel drive and boom, right into the bank, just as far as I could go. Couldn't go any farther. And I would say, I didn't need him. He went on his way, and I sat there for a few minutes. I was scared. And but he saw me, and he wasn't loaded. He was light, and he put the old foot to the pedal there, and boy, that truck was going, but it was going sideways, coming at me. Coming sliding like that. And I said to myself, I can't get out. I'm in the bank. I keep saying to myself, I'm not going to get out of this one. This one I'm not going to get out. He's going to take me right sideways. And he went by, and I'm not exaggerating, but probably I could have reached out and touched the truck. That was that close. I sat there, cold chills going up my neck. That was close. That was close. So I think Rocky Graziano had something about it, you know. Somebody up there does like me, you know, to protect me all down through the years like that. And I tell people that if I'm fortunate enough to go to heaven, I'm going to have to look up my guardian angel and say, I kept you busy, didn't I? I kept you busy. So the thing that I find in life is that I have to say I'm a churchgoer now, but I wasn't for years and years and years. One day didn't mean any more to me than another. And but I was at my camp when my wife, Edie, and I were going together. She bought me a Bible, had my name engraved on it. And but I'm going to admit it, but I'm kind of ashamed to say this. I took the Bible and put it up on the shelf, like the song, "Dust on the Bible." That didn't mean a thing to me, that Bible. And then one morning, up there by myself, trapping, studying my Bible then. I had time. I had my beaver traps out. I'm waiting for catching some beaver. And I get up one morning, had my Bible study, and I started to go out and looked up just with the light, and finally I had this very strong feeling inside me. And I don't say, you know, and I think people, I can't say they didn't, but the only thing I can find in the Bible when God actually spoke, he spoke, I'm sure to some of the prophets, but to Jesus only twice that I can record. One was his baptism. He said, "This is my beloved Son, whom I am well pleased." And the second time was at the Mount of Transfiguration. He said at the end, and his disciples heard him. So there was two times actually. But the Bible says that God speaks in a very small voice, and that's what I felt, was that small voice inside me. So, but anyway, I decided that, you know, that I needed to go to a church, and so I came out. Well, before I came out, this is quite amazing. I was snowshoeing, trapping, but I was snowshoeing, chasing this hound, and boy, there was like 5 or 6 feet of snow. Not that North Country, I'm sure you realize that. It's just nothing but powder. You step, you go down 1.5 feet, 2 feet. And I was doing that. The dog, because he was having quite a job, but he was chasing the cat, so the cat was making a road. But I had to make my own road. And sometimes I'd get in too close to a tree, and down I'd go. And I was rugged. I could grab, you know, do a lot of hard physical. I could grab a couple of trees like that and pull myself out. But what I did, I didn't know it. I had a kidney stone and I started it. So I came down for Christmas, and Christmas morning I got up, terrible pain in my side, terrible. And I said, well, maybe it'll go away. And so I paced the floors, couldn't sit down, couldn't sleep, couldn't do anything. And often I've said, if you have a kidney stone, if you don't get better, you just die because it's painful. So I got Edie up at 3 o'clock. She took me over to Miles Memorial Hospital. And Dr. Powell, I remember his name, he said, he examined me, he said, you got a kidney stone. I didn't tell him that. I said, how does he know? He didn't take an x-ray. But apparently they know how, they had the methods to feel, must have, because I didn't know. So the next, they put me in the hospital, and if you ever talk to them, you get a kidney stone, every time you urinate, you have to screen them to make sure you don't pass it. They want to know whether you can pass it or not. Sometimes you will pass it. 2 days, and I didn't pass it. They said, Mr. Cronk, you don't pass that stone tonight, we're going to operate tomorrow morning. And that was by 81, I think. And back then, they didn't have the laser treatment. You had to be operated on. Well, my beaver traps out, nobody knew where they were. Not that the animals would be drowned. They'd drown within a minute, 2 or 3, depends on how much air they got in their lungs. But I would have lost the pellets. And I was doing that for my living. What am I saying? So I had enough faith then to realize that the Bible says nothing's impossible for God. So you have to have faith enough to believe what the Bible says. So I said, Lord, I said, you know my condition. You know where the traps are. You know where nobody can find those traps. And I prayed 4 times. And the next morning, they took me down. They x-rayed me. The doctor came in with a puzzled look and said, I don't know what's going on. But he said, you don't have a stone. And I did not pass it. So then Edie, yeah, she said, they got an evangelistic series meeting over to Brunswick. It's a Seventh-day Adventist hospital, church, right? It's the hospital. Said, would you like to go over? I said, yeah, I would. I said, I want to know more about a God that can do things like that, if you believe. And so I went over, and my Bible, listened to everything they said, word for word. Tried to find something wrong, couldn't find it. So I was with the minister 8 months studying with him. He wanted me to be baptized in 8 months. I said, no. I said, when I say I do, I will. But it was 15 months. So then I did some research and found out, actually, the Sabbath is Saturday. I was keeping the right day. You look in your dictionary, look at the word Sabbath. It's Saturday. But the majority of people keep Sunday. And that was changed in 321 AD, Emperor Constantine. So, but Jesus did mention that in his talks. He said, people will be keeping tradition. But I tell people, I don't care who it is, whether it's Catholic. I find a hard job to believe that Mother Teresa is not going to go to heaven. She did everything that Christ did. She thought only of other people. And there are hundreds and hundreds, thousands, probably millions of people that keep the first day. But if they don't know it, they don't understand it. God is not going to hold that against them. God says he winks at increase. So it's interesting. It's interesting. And it's like Walter Arnold, his Uncle Francis, he had a couple of sayings, a couple little stories that one of them is kind of cute. The other one, there's a lot more to it than what people realize. And he said, Walter, he said, there's good in everything. Good in everything. And Walter said, how? He was 12 or 13 years old. How can they be good in everything? So he said, I got him. I know. How is he going to answer this? So he came back and he said, Uncle Francis, you said there's good in everything. That's right, Walter, my boy. He said, now tell me where the good's going to come here. Man gets up, eats his breakfast, goes to work. Comes back, he looks, his house is burned. Nothing but ashes. He said, Uncle Francis cupped his hands and said, did you ever see the fertilizer in ashes? Good. See, good in everything. I call it the backwoods philosophy. But the one I tell people, and it's true, but it's so simple, they overlook it. It goes right over the head. It's too simple. He said there's a whole lot to just nothing. Give that some thought. Any subject you want to pick, there's a lot more to it that we can see or understand. And he was right. He was the backwoods philosopher. He was a smart man. Had a 4th grade education, which was common back in the 1800s. Yep. Now, any questions? I'll try to answer anything that